He had never imagined that a single journey would change his life forever. A wildlife photographer by profession and a seeker of silent truths in the untamed wilderness, he had arrived in Africa with nothing more than a camera, a duffel bag of essentials, and a heart longing for something real. The African savanna welcomed him like an ancient guardian, its open plains echoing with the rustling of grass, the cries of distant animals, and the unrelenting hum of wind that carried the scent of wildness. He set up his camp near a protected wildlife zone, miles away from any human settlements. The days were spent photographing animals in their natural habitats, marveling at the raw spectacle of life and death unfolding before his lens. But it was on the fourth evening, while trailing a herd of elephants to a remote watering hole, that he heard something that altered the course of everything. A weak, desperate cry pierced through the quiet. It wasn't the sound of any bird or known animal call. It was higher-pitched, tinged with panic. He followed it, heart-pounding, pushing through thick scrub and thorny bushes until he came upon a mud pit, nearly dried from the oppressive heat. There, struggling and smeared with grime, was a tiny lion cub. She must have fallen in chasing something or simply wandered too far from her pride. Her tiny legs scratched at the pit's walls, her cries ragged. She was starving, dehydrated, scared. He looked around, half expecting the rest of the pride to burst from the grasslands. But nothing came, just wind and dust. Kneeling down, he slowly reached out, careful not to scare her more. The cub growled, weakly but lacked the strength to resist. Gently, he cupped her under the belly, using a towel to get a better grip, and lifted her out. Her tiny body shook in his hands. He wrapped her in a spare shirt and gave her small sips of water from his bottle. The cub's tongue flicked out eagerly. Night was approaching fast. Lions were most active in the dark, and here he was holding one of their young. It was foolish to remain exposed, but leaving her to die was unthinkable. He made the decision to bring her back to camp. The walk back felt eternal. Every crack of a twig or rustle in the grass set his nerves alight. But they made it. His campmates were stunned. A lion cub. What was he thinking? But seeing her curled into a ball by the fire, breathing steadily, disarmed even the most skeptical. She was too small to pose a threat. He nursed her through the night, fed her milk, kept her warm, and stayed by her side as distant roars occasionally cut through the night air. He suspected the pride was searching. Perhaps they'd left her behind unintentionally, or maybe something had gone wrong. At sunrise, he knew what had to be done. They loaded into his vehicle and made the journey back to where she had been found. The savannah was quiet at first, then faintly a reply to the cub's weak mewl echoed across the plain. His heart jumped. From the tall grass emerged lions. First one, then three, then the entire pride, with an imposing lioness at the forefront. He placed the cub gently on the ground and stepped back. The lioness charged forward and halted inches from him, teeth bared, growling. He held still, breathing shallowly. Then she sniffed him. Once, twice. Her expression changed. Her ears softened. The growl died in her throat. She turned to the cub, licked her from head to tail, then looked back at him. He dared not move. The rest of the pride surrounded him. Massive bodies moved with graceful menace, encircling him, forming a living wall of muscle and fur. He was trapped, but something miraculous happened. They didn't attack. Instead, they acknowledged him. A gentle nudge here, a brush of fur against his leg, a stare that seemed more curious than threatening. The matriarch lay down beside the cub and let out a low rumble. The others followed suit, resting, yawning, some playfully batting at each other. The cub wandered briefly back to him, rubbed against his boot, then returned to her family. He slowly reached for his camera. They didn't react. Click after click. He captured the moment. The pride in repose. The cub safe. Himself among them. It was beyond surreal. When the lions finally rose and turned back into the grasslands, they left a man forever changed. Over the next week, he remained in the area. Every evening he returned to the watering hole, Sometimes the lions came, sometimes they didn't. But when they did, they never chased him off. The cub would always be there, healthier now, running, pouncing, and sometimes nuzzling his hand, before dashing back to her mother. The pride had accepted him, if only briefly, as one of their own. Word spread among his team and then to local wildlife rangers. They watched in awe as the lions approached him without fear or aggression. It was a relationship built not on force, but on instinctual trust. Eventually, the time came for him to leave. He spent his final night under the stars, the sounds of the savannah whispering their farewell. As the dawn broke on his last day, he made one final journey to the watering hole. The lions were there. He didn't approach, just watched. The cub saw him. She trotted forward, paused a few feet away, and looked at him for a long moment. Then, without a sound, she turned and disappeared into the grass. Back home, his photos stunned the world. Wildlife magazines clamored for his story. Interviews followed. But the images were only half the truth. What truly mattered was something unspoken. A bond, fleeting but unforgettable. He never tried to replicate it, never returned to find the pride again. Some things, he believed, were meant to remain untouched. Yet in the quiet hours of the night, he would close his eyes and remember the feel of warm fur against his hand, the sound of the cub's purr, and the incredible moment when a man was surrounded by lions, and what they did was nothing short of extraordinary. But the story did not end there. Months later, driven by an aching restlessness, he returned to the continent. Not to find the pride again, but to understand more deeply what had passed between them. He volunteered with local conservationists, helping track animal movements, monitoring territories, and building water reserves for the dry season. One afternoon, while scouting a camera trap on the edge of a familiar range, he noticed a set of tracks. Fresh, large, unmistakable. They led toward a thicket not far from the place he had rescued the cub. He followed them quietly, heart tight in his chest. The breeze shifted, and then he saw them. The pride, older now, stronger, and in the center, that same cub, now nearly grown. Her eyes locked with his across the clearing. She stepped forward cautiously, ears twitching. The others watched in silence. She came close, sniffed the air, and let out a soft chuff. He didn't move. She rubbed her head against his thigh like a house cat, then stepped away. It was enough. The connection remained. He returned to camp that night unable to sleep. His journal filled with pages of notes and sketches. He wrote about trust, not just among lions, but among all living beings. Soon he was invited to speak at international conferences, schools, even film studios. His footage was turned into a documentary, but he never sold the rights to the final images from that first day, the ones where he stood among the pride untouched. Because some stories are not for profit. They are for memory, for magic, for the wild.